Welcome back. According to the most recent data published in 2023 by identity theft protection service Security Hero, deepfake pornography makes up 98% of all deepfake videos online. In response, Vermont Attorney General Charity Clark is leading a bipartisan coalition of 47 state attorneys general, calling on major search engines and payment platforms to take stronger action against computer-generated deepfake, non-consensual intimate imagery, sometimes referred to as deepfake pornography. I sat down with Attorney General Charity Clark to learn more about it. So when we talk about deepfakes and non-consensual intimate imagery, what does that mean?
Well, a deepfake is when someone uses technology to make it look like someone is doing or saying something they're not really doing. So they would take, for example, a photograph from a yearbook page or someone's Facebook profile and attach it to the body of a sex worker in a pornography. And so we have unfortunately seen that this is largely targeted at girls and women.
And tell me who's at risk here and how concerned we should be as a community.
I think there's this interesting place when new technology is invented where it's the novelty and the coolness of it is kind of, very fresh and exciting. But the truth is there are these unintended consequences with the creation of deepfakes, of being able to use this technology. And it's very convincing. The technology now, it's not like, the Photoshop of days of yore where it's like you can tell it's Photoshopped. It's really convincing. And we have heard terrible stories of bullying to someone being so bullied that they killed themselves. And it really has motivated us to get involved with trying to direct all the players and all the stakeholders to create better policies to protect people.
Talk to me about the coalition and the 47 states that are working to try to protect people from this.
I was really proud to lead this coalition. Vermont, little Vermont is often joining other states with their good ideas, but this really came from our office here in Vermont. And 47 states is a lot of states, and bipartisan across party lines, people stood up and said, we want to be a part of this coalition. The coalition is calling on search engines like Google and payment platforms like PayPal to put measures in place to protect people. Right now, there's a federal law that actually protects a lot of search engines and other platforms from liability. But we know that these businesses, they don't want to be doing this kind of harm to people. We know that they want to be good corporate citizens. And because we have a lot of knowledge about data privacy and technology and deepfakes, we're kind of shining a light to start the conversation to say, please do better. There are things you can do to protect people and also to just start creating the norm that this kind of behavior is not acceptable.
So what can we do as a community to protect ourselves and our loved ones from potentially falling victim to this?
I'm going to talk especially to parents right now and say that parents really need to be involved in their children's online lives. It feels maybe like an invasion of privacy, but when you're a child, you are vulnerable to these kinds of things. And also, a great analogy that I think is used a lot nowadays is, would you drop your child off at a mall where you knew there were child predators there, right? Well, that's the internet, unfortunately. There are people doing harm to children online, and so it's up to parents to really get involved and try to protect their children that way. And also have conversations with your children about this. I think that's really critical too.
Definitely. And on the topic of AI in general, when we talk about our safety, what kind of advice do you have for us as consumers to protect ourselves against not just non-consensual intimate imagery, but all kinds of misinformation that we're being fed every day?
This is something I think about a lot. We have a marketplace that's online, and I think most of us buy, especially in Vermont, because there's not as many stores and shops here, we buy a lot of things online. But what I'm really concerned about is this same technology, deepfake, is going to be used to scam people. And consumers are not going to be so comfortable buying things online if they're not sure if it's real or not. And they're concerned that they're going to be scammed. And we've already seen this. The classic example that I always think of is someone made a deep fake of Taylor Swift to try to scam people into thinking they were getting Le Creuset cookware for free or in a lottery or something, and it was completely fake. and it can be very, very convincing. So this technology can be, harmful not just to people who find themselves, subject of a deepfake pornography, but also just general, lies on the marketplace that scammers are using to try to steal your money.
What else can we do as a society, and what other laws would you like to see passed to further try to protect our community?
Having the conversations and just making people aware is a huge step. So we're continuing to talk to parents, to legislators, and other stakeholders. We're very lucky. Congress actually did pass a law. I'm not always a big fan of the productivity of Congress, but I was really happy they passed, I think it's called the Take It Down Act, where if someone has a deepfake, non-consensual intimate imagery of you, you can ask the platform to take it down, and they have to take it down in 48 hours. So that is wonderful. But I think more really does need to be done, not just to educate people, but to put guardrails in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening. Remember, just because the technology exists doesn't mean we should be using it. There might be guardrails and limits put in place to protect people, and especially the girls and women who make up over 90% of this kind of technology.
And here in our region, are there any clues or signs of this problem here at home and what it looks like?
Well, I did ask our consumer assistance program if we had received any complaints of this nature, and we hadn't, but it reminds me to say that this is the kind of thing that someone would feel embarrassed or ashamed, even though it's completely not their fault, they did nothing wrong. And so I would encourage anyone who is, finds themselves the subject of a deepfake, non-consensual intimate imagery, to contact the Consumer Assistance Program in my office at 1-800-649-2424. They're used to helping consumers in all kinds of situations and can really kind of hold your hand and walk through how are we going to deal with this. So that would be my advice, for anyone who finds themselves a subject of this imagery.
So what exactly do these search engines do and these payment platforms when it comes to the susceptibility of this problem?
Well, an analogy for search engines is if you type in how to make a bomb, Google is going to redirect you to less harmful conduct than the answer to the question how to make a bomb. And we're calling on Google to treat this the same way, to say there is a healthier, better, less harmful way when someone types in, notification app. And for payment platforms, they don't have to do business with potential customers who are going to, peddle in this kind of technology that is doing harmful things to children and to women.
Because right now, if you type in how to make a deep fake image, it'll give you that.
Right, and here we have again the issue of this is kind of a new thing. This is a newer technology. It's a few years old, and so it's understandable that those guardrails haven't been put in place or they're just starting to be put in place. We want to make sure that the businesses themselves are part of the conversation, that the stakeholders have a seat at the table, and that they also are doing what they should be doing and can do to protect people.